Great to have you with us this morning, and thank you for joining us for this of our first session of the day, New Narratives for Nature. My name's Rosie. I'm from Bristol Zoological Society, and it's great to be part of the event today. And a particularly warm welcome if you're joining us online. Even if you can't be here in person, it's great to have you joining in, and I'm sure you'll all be very busy introducing yourselves to each other on the chat. I've been online for the last couple of days, so it's really lovely to be here in person, but it's good to have you with us as well. And I'm really pleased to introduce our two speakers today. We've got Dr. Alix Dietzel, is Senior Lecturer on Climate Justice at the University of Bristol, who specialises in a just transition and fair decision-making, bridging that gap between academic research and the real world. And Sam Narr, who is a founder and CEO of Kibbo Kift agency, a B Corp PR and performance agency working exclusively on projects that advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So welcome to both of you. It's brilliant to have you here with us, and thanks for joining us today. Each of them is going to present to us a short presentation, and we'll then have an opportunity to ask questions, including if you're online. So please do make a note. If you're anything like me, you'll think of a question as they're talking and then completely forget about it as soon as the Q&A starts. So make a note of those as you go along, or do, if you're online, pop them in the Q&A page so that we can keep an eye on those. And then after your presentations, we'll have questions from the floor. So Alix, you're going to talk to us first. And now this project that you're going to tell us about fits sort of within a wider context of what you do. Could you tell us a little bit about that to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our session. I'm really looking forward to showing you some of the work that I've been doing. So my work focuses, especially in the last 5 years, on just transition. And I'm especially interested in who gets to kind of decide what just transition means, both at the global scale, but also here in Bristol very locally. And it's interesting to me because there is no real universal definition of just transition. Justice is very situated, and it is very important to understand in different contexts what people envision as a fair way forward as we tackle climate change. So that's really important to me. And that's something I've been focusing on for the past few years. And one issue that keeps coming up is a kind of unfairness in that decision-making landscape. So who gets to be in the room, who is heard, what the environment sector looks like. So I'm going to touch on all those points in my presentation, but that is where the interest lies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. With no further ado, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, of course. Would you like me to keep sitting or go up to the...
It's entirely up to you, wherever you're most
I'm a lecturer, so I can't help myself to go up to the lectern. Great. So I'm presenting a project that we've been working on, my colleague Alice Van, who's also on this slide, and myself, which we've called Changing Nature. And it's all about diversity and inclusion in the environment sector. And this animation is from a series of short films we've produced, which I'll be talking about in the presentation, together with Beast in Media, which are kind of lessons on equality, diversity, and inclusion to take forwards. So I'll tell you a bit about where this came from, and then I'll show you one of the videos. But they're all free and available on YouTube if you want to see the other ones as well. So the background to this project, as many of you probably know, is that the environment sector is one of the least diverse in the UK as a sector. And we're only behind agriculture, which is the number one. So environment sector is second in terms of diversity and inclusion. It's no surprise to everyone in the room that it's a very white sector, dominated by the middle class. And this is something that is known on the ground in the environment sector itself, but also studied in academia. And we did a little bit of work on this in Bristol, and what we kind of found was that although this is very well recognized by the environment sector, which is full of earnest, lovely people who just want to make the world a better place, there is often a lack of time, resources, and practical knowledge around equality, diversity, and inclusion. So people recognize the problem, but they're thinking, what do we do next? How do we solve this? They're kind of looking around at each other. Who has the answer? And this can result in low confidence to address what are really structural barriers that are not the fault of a particular organization or advocacy group. And so what we wanted to do with our project is to kind of overcome that These videos come out of this project, but it's part of a bigger effort where we decided to deliver bespoke equality, diversity, and inclusion training directly to environment sector organizations in Bristol. We didn't run these ourselves because Alice and I are just two academics who don't have all the answers. So we worked with Diversity Trust, who delivered the training on our behalf and also spoke to the environment sector, people who came to these workshops, to kind of make it more bespoke to the context that they exist in and the problems that they face. And really, the project was all about building confidence, increasing skills, offering realistic actions that people could take with them. And crucially, we didn't go organization by organization. We made sure that these workshops were for lots of people to attend together and discuss problems in the sector. Because usually, I don't know about EDI training at your workplace, but at the University of Bristol, it's a video that you watch, and then you take a quiz alone at your computer, and then off to the world to be perfectly practiced in EDI, which of course is not a very effective way to do that training, and it also doesn't allow you to talk about issues, ask questions, and seek advice from people who are facing similar problems. And so we delivered these trainings, and then we thought, how do we capture this for the people who couldn't attend? You know, we can't train everybody in Bristol. So what are one of the outputs that we could kind of put forward from this project? And we decided on a series of videos, which Beeston Media produced. They're 1 minute long, and they capture key insights into kind of EDI lessons. They're like little fables. And the point of these videos is that they're very approachable. They're quite cute, as you can see from the animations here. And they offer kind of a little spark to start a discussion within an organization. In case you're wondering about the trainings, as I said, they were delivered by Diversity Trust and in conjunction with the sector. These are the workshop focuses, and this is where we pulled the videos from. So we covered a lot of different things, including, kind of changing the culture, which is a broad topic, down to very narrow topics like how do you chair a meeting well. So we've all been in meetings where not only is it a bit chaotic, but we know there's not enough room to ask questions or to push back or to raise your hand and say this isn't right. So we went from macro questions to micro questions in these trainings. In total, we had 29 organizations who participated in the training workshops with 58 individual participants, and lots of them attended more than one workshop, which was lovely. So that's all about the workshops. The videos, one of which I'm about to show you, are 8 animated shorts. And like I said, they're trying to spark conversation on how to tackle these issues within and beyond the sector. They were written and narrated by Roger Griffith, who hopefully many of you have heard of. He is a respected leader in the Black environment space, which was really important to us to get the messaging right. And Roger was really good at this. He actually grilled Alice and I for several hours before agreeing to do these videos to make sure that we had the right intentions, the right kind of plan, the right tone. And then he very kindly not only helped to write the scripts, but narrated the videos as well. These are the videos, so these are the little lessons. Diversity is not inclusion, unconscious bias, active bystanders, which I'm going to show you today, strength in numbers, brave spaces, responsible leadership, diversity is opportunity, and collective action. And there's also a, I think, 3-minute video which just explains why we've done the project, which I won't show you because I've just explained it to you, but exists as well if you want to share about the project. So I would like to show you this video. So I think I need to be able to click the button somehow, so I might need some assistance to get this video going. Just click next, okay. Oh. Somebody has a mouse, I can see it, so maybe trying to play it from the slide.
This is where I'm really glad I'm not in charge of the computer bit.
Sorry, guys. Is the image clickable if you click on it? I've also put the link in the slide notes in case you need to open it separately. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves for a moment while we sort this out. Have a little break. Think about, the project so far, whether you're excited to see the badger.
If you've not introduced yourself to your neighbor, now would be a good moment.
Yes, exactly. Yes, have a quick chat while we figure this out, guys.
It looks like
All
we're back
right, it looks like
online
we've got
again.
it.
Here we go.
If you're wondering how I've stayed calm, it's because I'm a lecturer and this happens all the time. All right, let's see.
In the heart of an ancient woodland, a busy hare finds its day interrupted by a badger, whose need to belittle casts a shadow over everyone. The other animals watch, but fear of becoming the next target prevents them from intervening, all except a humble hedgehog bristling with resolve. The badger gets a clear signal to back off from bullying. The hedgehog's decisive action ignites sparks of courage amongst the bystanders. The hare grows in confidence, and as the badger's tough facade crumbles, it makes an embarrassed retreat. The whole community can now rest a little easier, knowing bullying will not be tolerated. Active bystanding. How could you tackle bullying and harassment by being a better ally?
So everyone loves that hedgehog. It's a common favorite character because it's so cute and bristly and brave. So like I said, there are 8 of these videos, and they're meant to be a kind of start to a conversation. They're very non-threatening, and they are for diverse audiences as well. So we tried to make them as accessible as possible without making them condescending, of course. So the next steps are that we really want to share these videos far and wide. They're free to access on YouTube. We don't plan to charge for them. They're on the Cabot Institute for the Environment's YouTube page, and anyone can use them. If you're interested in more information about the EDI trainings and the findings that we had, we've written a policy brief. There's a QR code to that policy brief, and at the bottom is the link to the videos. And we are academics, so we've also written an 8,000-word paper. So if you're really keen on that, that will hopefully be out next year. It's currently under a round of review. And we are extending our work. We're kind of going beyond the environment sector now and working with the One City boards, doing a project with them over the next year to see whether we can capture the impact of these trainings even more precisely. So if you'd like to work with us or use the videos, please let us know. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting, Alix. It was great to hear about your work. Sam, you're going to talk to us next. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned is that you're founder and creative director at Democracy at 84. Tell us a little about that, what that is, before you start.
Hi, everyone. So Demo 84 for sure is a brand new think tank that I launched last week that specifically focuses on working class and youth representation in UK policymaking. What we want to try and do is focus on participatory research in areas outside of London to bring in working class voices and youth representation from areas across the UK into policymaking, essentially. The way we do that is we've got some creative interventions to engage communities using culture first. You'll get a taste of that when I speak about the example that I'm going to speak about in a moment in terms of the flavour. But really what we want to try and do is creatively engage communities in terms of why democracy matters and why we need democracy in these times. So yeah, brand new thing, check it out. It's called Democracy at 84, Demo 84. I'm running that alongside, somehow, Kibbo Kift agency as well, which is what one of the case studies I'll speak about today as well.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing from you. And diversity does seem to be an increasing theme in this session today and also yesterday as well. So why don't you take the floor and we'll crack on.
Yeah, well, I think, something that really informs my work is lived experience. I'm from a council estate in the West Midlands, third-generation immigrant. And my kind of initial background was studying subcultures, media and philosophy at university I'm a graduate in. And I moved to London with a dream that I was going to be a journalist, or eventually ended up in PR. Started off in fashion, moved over to film, then moved over to big consumer brands. And it was kind of while I was there, Brexit happened as well. And the echo chambers existed when I was living in London. I was like, oh, everybody's going to vote to remain in London. And then I spoke to my mum, spoke to my brother, everyone in the West Midlands, all of my friends, everyone was voting leave. And I was like, that's a really interesting dichotomy of opinion that we've got here in the space of a 2-hour train journey in terms of how political views can vary a lot. So when I started to learn about the climate crisis alongside social justice and issues around that really fascinated me. Once you can't unlearn some of the statistics around climate change and how it's going to disproportionately impact the global south and specifically working class people in the UK as well and our young people. I thought there was a bit of an opportunity. My prior experience was working with culture-defining brands. So I led Levi's PR and social media in the UK and the Nordic region for a few years. Launched an energy drink called Carabao. If people are into football, they sponsored the League Cup, so we launched them in the UK. So kind of had a lot of experience from a young age of working in culture. And I saw a gap at the time, this was like 2018, 2019, to kind of apply some of that learning and thinking into the climate space. At the time, it was very exclusive for somebody like me to kind of network in these circles and even just have like some form of revenue income from an industry like this. We talk about diversity in class. And I really don't like talking about myself, even though I'm up on stage. But it turns out that kind of, as a male Asian, I'm kind of one of the least represented groups in the whole of the sector, which is, I think it's around 4 or 5% representation, which kind of shocks me, really. Yeah, what I wanted to do is bring over some of those kind of culture skills and kind of work on campaigns that are kind of trying to approach the climate crisis in new and fresh ways for everyday people to understand. And we've done that over the years. So we've worked with over 70 clients now over the last 7 years, worked with the likes of Greenpeace on the big plastic count last year, something called the Climate Clock in New York City, which is the largest digital clock face that counts down to 1.5 in the world. We've done loads of projections around the world. We lit up the Christ of Redeemer and took it to various COPs. Worked with the Climate and Nature Bill as well, which is a big one in the run-up to the election last year, and loads of other super cool projects. Launched some consumer products. Surrey, the electric toothbrush, we launched them if anybody's got a Surrey. So yeah, that's a bit about our work. I think something that really is becoming more apparent and something that I might touch on a bit later is how the climate conversation in the UK and the US by default of our politics is becoming something that isn't as a popular subject anymore, and it's more about equality and how do we stop fascism, which is kind of interesting as well in terms of that evolution. But yeah, the project that I wanted to speak about today, I think some of you might have already seen it. It's called Climate Science Translated, and we worked essentially to represent climate scientists specifically into mainstream conversation by using the power of humour and comedy. So we worked with Joe Brand and Professor Mark Maslin on the first one. That was in 2023. And also at the same time, Nish Kumar and Dr. Freddie Otto. So I want to show that video next. And just a warning, there is like very strong language at the start of this video. So please, if you're offended, there is an uncensored version if you do want to share it after this, but you're just going to have to hear some strong language. But it's also, just to mention, that is also very much by design because the climate crisis is a fucking emergency, right? So we need to actually embed some urgency into our messaging, which this video does really well. So yeah,
I'm
I haven't got the
hoping it's
clicker.
quietly getting lined up by our brilliant Natural History Consortium team, who are tech wizards and have done this many times before.
While we wait, I mean, it's really funny because we are seeing a political landscape right now where, like, talking about language and explicit language, how we urgently communicate something. I saw JD Vance like saying shit in a press conference last night, and it's like language now is explicit language is now normalised in our kind of public discourse, which is kind of really interesting. Okay, I'll shut up.
I'll tell you what we can do. We need to stop doing the bad stuff.
Hi, I'm Dr. Freddie Otto, Senior Lecturer in Climate Science at Imperial College London, and my expertise is in weather attribution.
Hi, I'm Nish Kumar, comedian, and my expertise is triggering your racist uncle, often just by opening my mouth.
Human-caused climate change is fundamentally changing the fabric of the weather as we know it. It's leading to events which we've simply never seen before.
Translation, weather used to be clouds. Now we've made it into a sort of Rottweiler on steroids that wants to chew everyone's head off.
The continued increase in global average temperature is already causing higher probabilities of extreme rainfall and flash flooding, as well as more intense storms, prolonged droughts, record-breaking heat waves, and wildfires.
Bad weather used to mean don't forget your umbrella. Now it means possible death. And now, the weather report, sponsored by Simmons Funeral Plans.
This is not a problem just for our children or grandchildren. This is an immediate threat to all our lives.
I don't know if you're familiar with the film The Terminator, but if someone came from the future to warn us of this threat, they'd have travelled from next Wednesday.
We have entered an era of food and water insecurity. Heat waves are already causing crop failures across the world and worsening water shortages.
During lockdown, we had shortages of bog roll that nearly caused a civil war in Waitrose. Wait until what we've run out of is food.
The good news is that we have solutions. Renewables are now much cheaper than oil and gas, as well as less polluting. Switching over will save us trillions and improve the quality of our lives in the process.
To save our world, we don't need to fight aliens to the death or go back in time and kill Hitler, though I would still like to do that. We basically need to plug into solar and wind, which are better anyway and cheaper. So what could possibly be the problem?
For decades, fossil fuel companies have run misinformation campaigns, and now they are lobbying governments for new oil and gas fields. There is still time to prevent worst outcomes if we stop burning fossil fuels.
The voices who say we can't realistically replace fossil fuels are the same as those who said you'll never get rid of apartheid and let's be sensible ladies, you can't have the vote.
Share this video and get involved with others. The overwhelming majority of people want change before it's too late.
Huge change does happen, but only if we get our act together and act.
I think we can stop it there. But yeah, hopefully.
What did you think of my translation?
Boo the team, by the way. They use the uncensored version, so no bad language. But yeah, if you do want to check it out, it's on YouTube. You can have a look at that there. In terms of that campaign and what we did, that was done by the brilliant team, Utopia Vera and Nick Aldridge, who's actually in Parliament today for the National Emergency Briefing. The same team that are doing that did this campaign. We backed this up in terms of our media work with a survey where we surveyed climate scientists with data that less than 2% of the public can name a climate scientist, and 92% of climate scientists are worried about the future of their children. So essentially, in terms of our media campaign, we kind of did some stats, got some voices of the unrepresented climate scientists and put it at the heart of our messaging. Off the back of that, we have also, this was in 2023, by the way, we also did a new campaign of this in the US for the first time a few months ago, which is obviously very interesting given the political climate in the US. So we did that with David Cross from Arrested Development. If anybody knows who that is, you'll know his face if you saw it. And also teamed him up with Michael Oppenheimer, who's like one of the leading legendary climate scientists in the US, which was absolutely brilliant. We got loads of coverage for the campaign. We got Joe Brand and Mark Maslin on Good Morning Britain. We got David Cross and Michael Oppenheimer on CBS Morning News, which is one of the biggest morning news shows in the US. Guardian, New Scientist, New Statesman, LBC, New York Times, loads of other in terms of media exposure for this campaign. So yeah, I think that's that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing that with us. Let's give him a round of applause. Well, I don't know if you're anything like me. There's quite a lot of information we've just taken in there, and before I can think of a question, I need to sort of take that in. So we're going to reflect just for 1 minute, and just why don't you turn to your neighbour and say what struck you most from the videos and talks that you've just seen. What would you like to know more about? And we'll reconvene. And do share those things in the chat if you're online, and we'll reconvene in a couple of minutes and have some questions. Thank you. Well, I'm going to try my best to get control of the room again now. I hope that's given everyone a moment just to have a little think and take that in. Now, I know that we've got a roving mic somewhere, so please be ready to stick your hands in the air with questions. Just to get the ball rolling, I'm going to abuse my position and ask the first question just to get things going. Now, you've both used the forum of video, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Now, lots of us here might work for very small charities with very low budgets, but there are some great resources out there available on YouTube, aren't there? What would you say to companies who may not have the skills or budgets or time to actually produce these videos themselves?
I would say please don't use AI. That's the first thing I'd say. There's a lot of talented, creative people that can do moving image work. But then also, I mean, yeah, well, obviously in the digital age, aren't we? So, I mean, social media is key to communicating any form of message. For instance, like the video that I shared, the team worked really hard to chop down that video to about 40 different segments that they could put on social media and kind of get little snips and clips. But yeah, I think please don't use AI. But there's also, in terms of climate messaging over the years, I think of some of those old Greenpeace stills of plastic straws coming out of turtles' mouths and stuff like that. It's really stark, memorable images. They're also meme-like quality to them, which is obviously done by big advertising guys in the sector that I work from. So I think there is still a massive value in still image as well.
Yeah, and obviously the videos we produce are quite expensive because it's there's time and you need people to script it, there's the animators, there's the person who did the art, but not everything has to be like that, you know? I think that we all have our smartphones and we can make interesting content for social media without AI. And I do think it's really important to have these short snippets that you can put on social media, but also just show young people, because we know that they're not going to sit down to a 2-page policy brief or an 8,000-word academic paper. So for us, it was really important to have these short messages that were accessible to anyone who kind of pressed play.
Remind us how long your videos are.
They're about a minute long.
About a minute long, yeah. And that's about the attention span that we're used to these days, isn't it? Fantastic. Okay, have we got any questions from the floor? Yes, we do.
So I'm coming in with an online question already. So Julia, who's joining us online, wants to hear a little bit more about the approaches and messaging, saying, Alix, you've taken more kind of friendly and non-confrontational approach, the other a bit more direct messaging and humor. So just a bit more dive into the choices made there.
Yeah, I think for us, accessibility was the most important piece, because we know that what we wanted was videos that anyone could use and they wouldn't feel like they didn't understand, or we don't want our audience to feel stupid or like it's not for them. So we took this approach with very nicely, cutely animated, beautiful landscapes, because we wanted to pull people in. And we know, with the rise of the far right and reform and the messaging of saying this doesn't matter, or this is woke nonsense, we wanted to avoid being preachy, condescending, having me and Alice basically giving a lecture about justice. That's the opposite of what we wanted, and that's how we kind of worked with Beast in Media and Roger, who were amazing, and spent lots of time, really thinking about the messaging. So that's how we landed on this approach to have these accessible videos.
Yeah, just to carry on from that, obviously the approach that I've shared in terms of using comedy and humour is one that I believe in. I feel like there needs to be a lot more bold approaches in terms of how we communicate the urgency of the climate crisis. So much so, touching on what Alix mentioned as well, around the rise of reform and what Zach Polanski's doing right now in terms of his eco-populism message, which is clearly working in terms of the British public, going beyond kind of the kind of echo chambers that some climate communication sits within. I think is a real great case study of how we can do that. And I think it's really interesting, actually, because what he's doing is not speaking about climate and nature first, which is probably something we all don't want to hear in a climate and nature conference. But he's talking about inequality and social justice, and that is kind of then Trojan horsing some of the nature and climate policies that are now unfortunately becoming politically loaded. which I think is also very interesting too. Climate science as a whole is like, there's a big distrust around it because of the world that we live in, which is really, really sad to see. There was a really great report out from Britain Talks Climate recently, and I would definitely encourage everybody to read that in terms of British opinions to climate and different cohorts that exist. But one of the big things they found was that it was kind of it's distilling complex climate science into something that average, everyday people can touch and feel. So how do we meet people where they are when it comes to understanding the impacts of the climate crisis? I think Rosie mentioned how ice caps melting in Greenland, like people that are living day to day in council estates in the UK really don't give a fuck about that, really. Do you know what I mean? It's unfortunate, and they should, but it's really not that immediate to them. And it's our job as communicators to make it really a really appealing message that people can interact with and engage with.
Fantastic. Do we have any questions in the room?
Hi, thank you for that. It was really interesting. Sam, I was really interested to hear from you because I'm from a council estate as well, and I do feel in this, power to the council estates. And I do feel quite alone in this sector. I think it's quite rare. So I was interested to hear that, and I've done a lot of work in EDI with some of my colleagues over the last few years, and it's so important we reach new audiences because we're asking people to care about nature and care about the climate and care about the environment. And if they don't see themselves in it, and if they don't see themselves affected by it, they're not going to. That's just my tiny rant. I just wondered, both of you, who do you think's doing it right? Because it is about the messaging and it is about being bold. And I think a lot of people have the will to do good things, but they get a little bit scared about pushing the boundaries. I just wondered if you think anyone's doing this messaging well at the minute.
Well, we were talking about the leader of the Green Party, weren't you? And you just mentioned him. What, can you say his name again? Because
Zach Polanski.
Zach Polanski, yeah. We were talking just before we went on stage about, like, if you compare that to, like, Labour's social media, which is really, like, not being received well. He's really pushing, like, the boundaries a bit and how he's communicating quite directly and the issues he's bringing to the forefront and getting people on board, which is so interesting. And what he's doing, in my mind, is, like, he's touching on those fears that people have and that anger that people have, which Reform do as well. But it's in a way that makes people feel hopeful. And that is such an interesting way to approach things. Mamdani in the States has just done this as well, and somehow flattered Trump. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the memes after the meeting between him and Trump. They were hilarious. But they're touching on fear and rage and injustice that people can feel, but they're kind of giving them this hope. And they're doing that really well. It's really admirable to watch that.
Yeah, I just want to echo that entirely. I was going to mention Mamdani as well.
Sorry.
And his and what he's done in the US. I remember when he won the Democratic race, I think it was early this year. Like, I felt that was a massive win for me. I got emotional seeing that. And it was like, that is like the first bit of hope that we've seen in politics, in Western politics for so long. So yeah, I think those two examples are really good in terms of people. I've wrote some other campaigns down which I really loved as well over the years. There was Brian Eno, I think, worked with the culture section of the UN, and they rephrased nature as an artist on music, on certain Spotify tracks. And essentially by doing that, he directed royalties from people that listen to those songs to nature-based charities and funds, which is like a great way to communicate, like, or even you don't even need to know about the complexities of climate, just listen to these songs and you're indirectly supporting climate justice, which is super cool. Purpose Disruptors as well. I'm not too sure if anybody knows of that group. They have done, for the second time, an advertising agency for nature, where they kind of create these creative provocations to engage people that are kind of beyond the current echo chambers in climate that we speak of. But they did like a whole zine, which was super cool a few months ago for goths. And like goths, like relation to the climate crisis in nature, and they used Chris Packham for that as well. He used to be a punk when he grew up, which is super cool, like tapping into subcultures. And they also did at the same time like bird watching and football. So what birds were closest to football stadiums across the UK, and kind of made that message and linked it all up for people that are like football fans, obviously. So yeah, those are kind of really good examples of like ways that we can think outside the box and communicate to everyday people. Going back to the council estate and the upbringing, though, I think there's something really interesting in that, because my experience of growing up in the UK was actually full of nature. I was out playing all day. We had big fields around us, lots of public space because of the estate that we grew up on. And I'm yet to, maybe I do this, but I'm yet to see a study that shows and documents exposures to green spaces for working class people, as opposed to middle class who might live in suburban areas as well. So yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Thank you. We've got another question from our online audience.
Hi there. This is from Ewan, who's online. Question for Sam. Sam, we loved the video. The scientist in your video used largely accessible language. Wondering, was there a discussion about the technical level of that contribution? Because if the scientist had used more academic language, it might have made a more contrast or interesting dynamic.
Yeah, good take. I mean, we didn't write the script, that was the creative team, but it was definitely by choice. It was to keep people sucked in and bringing them along. I think the video was like 3 minutes long, so I think if she was using really complex terms again, I think it could turn a few people off and kind of miss the message of what Nish Kumar was trying to translate. A lot of the times he was using hand actions like hitting his face, for instance. And I think if you didn't have the initial context that was really easier to understand from Dr. Freddie Otto, you might miss the actual point of the video, but point well taken for sure.
Any other questions from the room? Yes. The microphone is on its way to you.
Sorry, another question for Sam. I found your video really, really inspiring. So I work for Gloucester Wildlife Trust, and I would say working class people, and specifically probably people in poverty, are some of the hardest audiences to reach. I remember reading a report that was saying that people from those backgrounds, it's not that they're not aware of the climate and nature emergency, it's just that they often have other things to think about. And bearing in mind that sometimes the brand of the wildlife trusts and conservation charities like the RSPB can be fairly restrictive, so kind of vulgar language is off the table. You, as someone that's from that kind of background, even though you had access to nature, what would have kind of spoken to you the most from organisations like the RSPB, like the Wildlife Trust? Like, how could we have reached in? Bearing in mind, I would say that things like our social media, we're already kind of shouting into the void to audiences that kind of our messages appeal to. It's a challenge that I'm trying to kind of think about at the moment.
I think it's as we mentioned earlier on, it's how do you see yourself in marketing and campaign messaging. So that's why diversity in creative is really important. I mean, as a kid, when I was growing up, I mean, I didn't care about the climate crisis. I cared about football. I cared about rap music. I cared about, does a girl like me? Yeah, I mean, everyday kind of problems that people exist with is what I felt. And I feel like kind of that's why lived experience and getting people embedded in those strategies is really important, so they can understand those nuances and understand how people think and behave. Also, working class communities is so diverse. I think it's like something like 55% of the population working class. There's so many different subsections within that as well that exists. I always think about my upbringing being Asian and like simple things. We did a huge campaign with Greenpeace around plastic consumption, household plastic consumption. And like even the differences between black and Asian communities and white communities and how we consume plastic via our grocery shopping. I know for a fact Asian families go to like markets more that buy veg loose, for instance, and nobody's really like tapped into those like really interesting cultural nuances yet around how people experience nature. There's also, I wanted to mention one thing as well, which really caught my eye that I made a note of, that I can't find somewhere. In terms of inclusive messaging, there was a really interesting report around religions and what religions take more climate action between the different groups. Actually turned out Hindus and Muslims felt the most compelled by their faith to take environmental action, and Christians were at 31% the biggest group to deny the climate crisis. And I also think even within that, there's an opportunity to engage Muslim and Hindu communities more so than Christians, or put a challenge to Christian communities out and say, like, look, we've seen this. So yeah, there's a lot of nuances between different people that exist. In terms of how you would target me, it would be speaking to those little kind of interesting little nuggets of information and bringing those to life creatively, essentially.
Thank you. Has anyone else got a question in the room? Yes, we have a question at the front and one on the right.
Sam, this is one for you. Given that you had lots of coverage for that video you showed us, which is clearly aimed at an adult audience, what about the youngsters? Because they're the ones who are really going to face the problems of climate change, aren't they? You need to get to them.
Yes, you could argue the decision makers on young people. So appealing to those is kind of key. I think the video that we actually shared was the censored version. So I think that would actually be suitable for young people as well. So that's why we did actually create 2 different versions. One that can kind of shock people and have some shock value. Sorry we didn't play that for you earlier on. But that younger one is a universal message that could easily be played in schools and appeal to young people as well.
And I think we've just got a couple of minutes left. Amelia, there's a question over on the right-hand side of the room there. On the right. Sorry. Waving madly.
Thank you. I love the material that you were showing, and huge kudos to you, Sam, for getting the stars involved. Obviously, that really helps. But obviously, there is just so much out there in terms of material online. How did you cut through so much madness online to make sure that people did actually watch those videos? And how can we do more to try and get our material like that in front of more people? Because obviously it's just so difficult. Like the woman from the Wildlife Trust was saying, you're often just talking to the converted and people that just want to find that content. So how do we try and break through that to reach a wider audience of people that need to see it?
Yeah, well, I think there's instant credit to the team behind that video. So Nick Aldridge, who funded that project, I hope he doesn't mind me speaking about this, he kind of personally funded that, I think, from his own pension, from his kids' inheritance, to do those videos. And like, you need that kind of bold leadership for people to take action today, because he knew that those funds in 50 years' time might not have the same worth because of the climate crisis. So like, that in itself is a really inspiring story, that he decided to do that and work with people like us to kind of communicate that message more effectively. Secondly, I'd probably say, not to plug our own services, but you need good people to communicate the message. If you've got a creative vision in mind, how do you translate that to a mass audience via PR is really, really interesting. How do you kind of get a mass message out that's appealing to people in the right channels and right avenues is an interesting thing to do as well. So, I mean, to supplement the PR exposure, I know the team spent quite a bit of money on social media ads, to kind of fight the algorithms, because we all know that they're working against people right now, and try to get the message out in various ways. So I'd say it's a bit of a combination. You need bold leadership from people that want to try and do something that's really different, or get funds from arts organisations to do something very differently. And then you also need a really compelling media strategy in terms of how you launch something as well.
Fantastic, thank you so much. We've just got about 1 minute left, and I'd like to ask you both, just to really briefly, if you wanted, we've got about 180 people online, we've got everybody here in the room. What one key thing would you each really like people to take away from the session this morning? One key thought, putting you on the spot.
I think for me, the key message was like, these videos were so far out of my comfort zone as an academic. I really like writing my 8,000-word papers and my policy briefs. And Alice and I were pushed to do this creative project with lots of encouragement by lovely people, including the people from the Cabot Institute for the Environment at the university, who encouraged us. And so I think sometimes just pushing through that comfort zone and trying something totally new and taking a risk can be really rewarding. And I'm so glad we made these videos, and I'm really proud of them, as scary as it was to take that step.
Yeah, I think my thing would be kind of recognising the times that we're in. Like, we've seen a genocide for the last 2 years, which is arguably still ongoing. We are seeing fascism on the rise. All of these kind of components, we're seeing AI come up, which is going to have a devastating impact on class. Working class people specifically. So we're not in usual times. Like, the same strategies that we had 5 or 6 years ago just isn't going to work that well anymore, because we're at a state of crisis on an individual level and on a communal and a societal level as well. So I think when we speak about how do we communicate or new narratives. We need to be understanding how people are feeling on a day-to-day level. And I think right now it's a very difficult time for people, and being conscious of that, and how can we pop up, if you're a small organisation or you're doing a marketing campaign, how can you pop up in a way that's either going to provide people hope or provide people with a tangible action that they can feel like they're empowered to do something, which I think is really, really important.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. I'm afraid it is time for us to finish there, but I know that we've sparked lots of conversations that I hope people will continue as we move into coffee before the next session. It's time to say goodbye if you're joining us, if you joined us online. Thank you so much for participating in the session, for everybody who put questions forward. But most of all, a huge thank you to Alix and Sam for your contributions this morning and for sharing those presentations with us.